Are we both in the shot?
We're both in the shot. Could we be in the shot?
Is it changing how you campaign, or is it simply being willing to compromise and come to the table?
They say that diffuses the messaging overall, and that's one of the reasons they would not vote for someone aligned with the Democrats. 51,000 votes in an hour, that's pretty good.
The middle part of the country for a long time has been like, partisanship is dangerous, obstructing anything from actually getting done. And when you ask people on face value, like, should they compromise more? Yes, but do they want their side to compromise? Do they want their, ideals to be compromised?
You know, I was thinking about this today for the podcast. We've done a bunch of it. I think we've done 20 now, right?
I think this is 21.
Yeah, you need to listen to the podcast. And she's Kristin, Brey, and I'm Steve Scaffidi. We host the Point Taken show on 620 WTMJ from 10 to noon every weekday. So I'm thinking about this stuff, and we always have this sort of back and forth about topics, right? So
yeah, I mean, you and I don't know if there's anyone I talk to as much as you besides my husband.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Right, as far as just between our seeing each other every day, texting one-on-one, and then our other group chat with our other two political lunatics. Yeah. And so we talk a lot as far as things that are top of mind and things that we're listening to and how we can either bring it to the show or bring it to this podcast.
I feel like there's a podcast just that. The fact that sounding board is the way that I
having your trusted advisors.
Yeah. Because
you don't need to tweet everything that ever comes to your mind. Just have a trusted group chat.
Good reminder for people. Everything you say is not brilliant. And one of the things that I want to talk about today. So when we go back and forth, you and I, about topics and things that we may talk about in the future, either on the podcast or the show, I was watching Michael Smirkanish, whose show I watch every Saturday morning, 8 o'clock, CNN. Brilliant podcaster, broadcaster, author. He's sort of how I modeled my old show.
Okay.
I did the show poll like he does every Saturday. I did it daily for 3 years. He asks questions that are very relevant politically. And he had one this week that it sort of touched on some of the things you and I have been talking about, politics in general, popularity of politicians, what the messaging is from parties. And the question was this, and I'm going to read it just because I'm do my best to read that small print. He asked, this is from the New York Times, if the Democrats were willing to be less ideological, and he didn't define it, just less ideological, they would have the opportunity to build the country's next governing majority. And he basically gave them two choices, agree or disagree. Agree won 80% to basically 19%.
So I have a lot of follow-up questions.
I know you do.
With that. Because I think there's also times that the left, like the political left as a general umbrella of the online left and the rhetoric, right? That isn't also always representative of the people who are elected Democrats, right? Like we saw this with the reaction to Charlie Kirk from the online left, was different than any elected politician, all of whom, every Democrat completely condemned that murder, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's like when they say, because I don't necessarily see Democrats as hardline ideological people who are not as a united front as far as being too ideological. I think the online left is too ideological. I think the online left has these purity tests that are obnoxious even to people who are on the left. It's just oh my God, really? This is what we're fighting about? And so I have way more follow-up questions as far as what does that mean and what does it mean to the people, 80% of the people who respond to that saying yes. So what does that mean? What does it mean to you?
So I think the 80% were saying when you talk about their view, this general population of people who responded, and the number was significant. It was 51,000 votes in an hour. That's pretty good for any kind of polling. Because as we know, and I worked in research for a long time, those sample sizes, even for network TV, were very small.
Yeah, I mean, well, in scientific polling, it's 1,000 respondents.
This is not that. This is not scientific, but it's still, catching what people think about whatever topic. At the moment, this is what comes. This is how they vote. I think it suggests to me. This is how I would define it. They are saying, the people that responded to this poll, 51,000 people, that their view of Democrats is they do lean too far left. For example, what did we talk about so much during the campaign? DEI. They would say, I think, and again, this is anecdotal because I don't know, they would say that so much time and energy spent on DI programs, not that they're not valued, because I think a lot of them are, but that conversation about others and not the mainstream population or the majority population, I think they say that that diffuses the messaging overall, and that's one of the reasons they would not vote for someone that aligned with the Democrats. That's sort of how I see it, and that's just one issue. There's obviously other ones, abortion, and you pick one: gun violence, gun rights, Second Amendment, even how we treat the poor in this country, or some of the entitlement programs. All of these things, I think, have a left lean that some people who identify as maybe middle, they don't like some of the left-leaning ideology of the candidates and or the elected officials. That's my reading.
Okay. So then, because this segment for his show was based off of the New York Times editorial board. So they basically looked at the 16 or 17 seats in 2024 where either the congressman or the senator won or voted differently. They won even though their state either voted for Trump or Kamala. Mm-hmm. So basically looking at swing districts where people split ticket voted for the top of the ticket, being president and either U.S. senator or U.S. congressman. And it's interesting because they're basically making the argument to be more moderate. Mm-hmm. And we talked about this a little bit on today's show, this being, we're recording Monday, so this is coming out Thursday. If you want to go back and listen to what we talked about on Point Taken on Monday, October 27th, which is like the difference between what are we talking about when we talk about moderate? What are we talking about when we talk about centrist? Are we talking about you ideologically changing your views? Is it changing how you campaign? Or is it simply being willing to compromise and come to the table? Because one of the examples the New York Times editorial board used was Tammy Baldwin, who I don't think anyone says is a centrist.
She's often considered the most left-leaning of all of the senators.
But the way she positions herself, the way she prioritizes what she puts her name on, isn't the Green New Deal.
No,
right?
It's actually more centrist than people think, and it's one of the reasons she wins in big margins every time she runs.
And it's like, and I think about that even as, I think a lot of people who have seen my work for the last 5 years project whatever they think I am. But like, there's a lot of people who I think because I am open to conversation, because I am open to compromise, like consider me center left versus like what my utopia looks like is probably considered very left.
Yeah.
But I understand that in a diverse electorate, you don't always get what you want, right? And that there is the reason why there is healthy democracy is when there's a debate to try to get to the best answer to benefit the most amount of people. Now, what I think is the problem right now is there's majority of people are not winning right now, right? There's a very small, when we talk about winning as far as like financial security, health-wise, like reaping the benefits of what this country has to offer, I feel like that pool of people is getting smaller and smaller. And so there's more and more frustration by both parties. And I don't know if either, yes, the Republican Party won in the last big election, but like, for all we know, that's going to swing again because it's constantly just like a change attitude and a change party because neither party does a good job of actually fixing anything.
I would argue that the 2024 presidential race is an argument about why this works because the president correctly identified topics that were in the center, which was border policy. That wasn't a left-right issue anymore. There's many people on both sides of the aisle said that's just a mess and has been for decades.
But then it's interesting because I think when you push it further, I don't know the exact polling on this, but the difference between securing the border and the popularity of that, but also actually improving immigration policy and the popularity of that. And he's done one without doing anything about the other.
Exactly right, yeah. But often it's just that superficial, that's the nature of the Trump administration. They do the superficial thing to satisfy this need by the public, in this case, the perception that the border's messed up. He did that. He didn't do the rest because he doesn't care about the rest. He looks at everything superficially, whether it's tariff trade, whether it's international relations, whether it's the border, whether it's crime. Everything's done superficially, but it meets that desire by this big group in the middle, and I would argue most of it's the middle class, who are just feeling oppressed and, to make your point even further, where they don't have the means to survive anymore. It's not. It used to be the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Now it's that whole middle section. They're also feeling the strain. That's why when we talk about the economy, if you're not including that group, you're missing the point completely. So I think the president identified that correctly. You could argue the same thing about his notion of crime. Now it's, again, very superficial, but that tapped into that idea that people who are in the middle, whether they were identified left, identified right, but they typically kind of stay in that middle region, middle left, middle right, or independents, they latch onto these perceptions and they vote that way. And that's, I think, the point.
So let's take this to the logical conclusion of you saying, because there's obviously an argument is like, well, why don't you ask the right to come to also be less fringy? But whatever. So
I can answer that question.
But so if we're talking about Democrats and we're talking about the because I would say, as much as you still identify as a conservative and a Republican.
Not a conservative, Republican. I've dropped the conservative.
Oh, you have?
It's a waste of time because there's no real conservatives anymore. I'm like an old man, literally, but also an old man in the conservative sense because the new conservatives are not conservative. And that would be my
It's interesting that you're holding on to the party identification,
because
but
I
not
believe in
the
small
ideological
government. Only
identification.
because I believe in fiscal responsibility and small government. That's
but do you feel like the Republican Party stands for that still?
Not the new version, but that's what I stand for.
That's what I mean. So like that, it's
I define
I
myself.
just, I know. I just think it's interesting as far as which word you're holding on to.
Yes.
But I would argue, and I think most people who listen to you would say you're also moderate.
Yeah.
That you're a moderate person. Yeah. And so as far as do you identify as being in that clump that could be up for grabs if the Democratic Party, according to that poll, became, quote, less ideological?
Sure.
So be more specific for you personally of what would a Democrat, let's say either for senator in Wisconsin or your congressman, what would they have to look like to win your vote, since you really have never voted for Democrats, but you have sometimes written in
what
candidates.
What would this fictional candidate look
like?
like?
What does that mean to you if we're trying to be more specific as far as what does it mean to be less ideological for a Democrat to actually win your vote?
It would be for a Democrat to have a very common sense opinion on abortion rights.
Which was what?
I think it's some of the limitations that we saw in some of the states across the country.
So, like, what is it? It's in Wisconsin right now, like 20 weeks.
Yeah, that might be a little harsh, but not unlimited access, I think, is the point.
Okay.
Again, you and I both know, we've talked about this many times, that end case scenario is very, very extremely rare. So
it's usually because of the life of the mother.
Yes, so we tend to let that kind of carry the story, but that's not the case. So what would that person look like? They would have to be a Democrat that was aware that we have a fiscal mess in this country. That deficit spending, what did we just hit, $39 trillion, is out of control, must be slowed down. Would acknowledge that ideas like just paying down student loan debt willy-nilly makes no sense. What would have made sense from a Democrat perspective, here's how we can sort of tailor this program where we can meet the needs of new students in a more consumer-friendly fashion with lower interest rates, but people who are caught in this mess, who got swindled essentially by banks and lending organizations, how we can fix that. Instead, Democrats went all the way to we're just going to absolve, get rid of it.
So like introducing something where students can refinance versus just absolving all debt.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the linchpin of it. Common sense when it comes to fiscal responsibility with how they spend our dollars. But it also means that I need a Democrat who is going to be not afraid or not how do I put this, is not afraid to speak kindly of the other side. Because I see too much of that on both sides where they just attack. We had it today, Senator Falkowski, just taking shots at Democrats for no reason on an issue that...
on the shutdown.
Yeah.
I mean, that, yeah. Well, I mean,
that's laziness.
But isn't that, so this comes back to party politics as far as like message discipline. And this is why, as we talk about certain things that have been happening in Wisconsin when it comes to Wisconsin Democrats not being very vocal about something that's happening at DPI right now, which we talked a lot about last week. And I'm randomly, even though I am not a Democrat proxy, as some asshat wanted to call me on Twitter. This is the podcast, so I can say that. But, it's like I'm randomly getting kudos from Republicans on my willingness to talk about this, which feels dumb because it feels like a nonpartisan issue that everyone should be like, hey, there's a problem. We got to fix it. And as we're talking about teacher misconduct and how we're investigating that in the gray areas of things that aren't illegal or criminal, but are wildly inappropriate. And how do we investigate that as a school district, as DPI, et cetera? But it feels like I don't know if I could ever do party politics, because if your majority leader comes down on you and then all of a sudden withholds funds for you to get reelected, like, there is leverage that they have to keep people in line, which is, from the standpoint of leaders in the party, what their job is. And so does it just take that much moral courage and political courage, because what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, and you don't care about getting reelected?
A true elected official who has his constituents in mind, all of his constituents, not just the ones that agree with you on the issues of the day, and is willing to say, I'm going to say this even though I may not get reelected, those are the real politicians. Those are the people that are brave enough, because I think the public would respect that. We don't have any, I shouldn't say any, we have rare number of people now in politics who are willing to take that chance. It's all about, especially when you talk about the House, or in our case, the Assembly, it's all about reelection. They're already worried about that. So they need their Speaker of the House, Speaker of the Assembly, to sort of give them the validation that they're part of the team. And what that's resulted in is many periods of time, including Congress right now, they're not doing any work whatsoever, and they're making a decent salary for no work. They would argue they're doing their, work in their districts, but they're not really. They're just spending time on talk radio and TV. And in the state assembly, they literally go away for months at a time. It's insane.
Yeah, which will either be probably the end of April or end of March, early April next year. The Senate and the Assembly in Wisconsin will just be like,
yeah,
see you next year.
Which was never the intention. It used to be in those times, those periods in the summer, where you would spend time sort of thinking through the policies that would be enacted in the fall, right? You'd sort it out. You have your committee meetings, all that stuff. Now it's, we'll go back to your district, do whatever you got to do there. We'll see you in the fall. That's not how it was set up, but that's what we have now because of the incredible partisan nature of politics. And I think what this survey is trying to say, there's a place now where people would, I think, cross over if a candidate was brave enough, and that's part of it, and smart enough to understand that the true answer to what ails us has always been there. It's the art of compromise. It's the art of listening. It's the art of actually not talking about things, but actually doing things. And I think there's an appetite, because I had 2 conversations this weekend about this very subject.
So you've teased this a couple times.
Yes.
So what did they say?
So one was at a burial ceremony, and we had a lot of time because it was a long 2.5 hour production, which was beautiful, military funeral. But I had a chance to talk to some regular folks that I know, and what I've noticed, and I've said this to you on the show, is lately people have sort of been pulling back from politics, but not Saturday. They were re-engaged in talking about politics, because they know what I do. Most of the people know that even the funeral director was like, yeah, you work on WTMJ, I know your show, love your show, blah, blah, blah. He goes, what do you think about what's happening? And to the person almost, they said, I can't believe the stuff that's passing for normal politics now. And you and I talked about it today, the absurdity of what the president says on a daily basis. And then Sunday, I talked to 2 farmers from Minnesota. They were at a family gathering, who are soybean farmers. And they were Trump supporters. And they said, can't do it anymore. This is nuts, both on the conduct, right? Tariff policy that actually is made their soybean crop worthless right now. And thank God their other crops, which is mainly corn, was off the charts successful, so they could survive that. And that they're at their end of their farm life because they're going to be retired soon. And they also said the personal conduct of the president and the words he chooses to use, the ways he attacks people, make them never going to vote for someone like that again. That's from 2 people that voted for Donald Trump this week, and I had those conversations.
Did you ask them specifically if they'll vote for a Democrat next year?
I didn't ask them that question because I didn't frame it that way.
Because I think that ultimately is, do people start to separate the head of the party right now, being Donald Trump, from their candidate for a lower office?
I know you think that's the line, but what's the magic of elections, national elections? It's where the independents are. They always cross over.
Oh, no, I know. But
it's not a rare thing. It's just rare for those party-affiliated folks to do it. That's the needle that has to move on both sides, right to left, left to right. If you can get that group, which is what I think they were trying to get to with this study and this survey, if you can get those folks, independents already do it. I know people that vote both sides constantly.
So what changes their mind? Is it based on, I mean, this is anecdotal, but do you think it's based on their feelings about the parties at any given point, or is it the difference of specifically who that candidate is?
I think frustration is going to play a part. That's certainly what the farmers were expressing to me, so that's a piece of it. A candidate really, whatever their affiliation is, that seems genuine and honest and is not willing to fall back immediately on the, Well, I have to ask my party leaders what they think about that. That's the laziness. And
Only do the like tested messaging every time they get interviewed.
Yeah, right. The talking point stuff, and you and I know this. We interview a lot of people when they use the same damn words in different interviews at different Do you think we don't
Brinksmanship?
Yeah.
I think that was a recent one that got used a lot.
Yeah. Another word I hate is masterclass. This person did a masterclass. He was on a talk show and he said something. That's not a masterclass. That's the frustrating part for me. I think there's potential here. There are voices that are starting to say this, not just the individual people that I talk to, but people that are thought leaders, people that are communicators like us. I think it can pick up momentum, but we have to want to do it. Now, I will say this, and this will irritate all the fans of Donald Trump. He's the single most destructive element we have in politics. I don't think he's smart. I think he says dangerous things under the guise of I know everything. And I think he's doing some very destructive things when it comes to the infrastructure of this country, let alone his damage to the White House, which is unfortunate. And
both metaphorical and literal.
Yeah, in his words.
Figurative and literal. Is that what I want?
So I think that's the risk here. You and I did a whole episode on life after Trump. I don't know when that's going to be, and I'm hopeful that we can survive all this stuff. But it's the one reason I said today on the show that I'm less optimistic than I used to be. This gives me some hope. The fact that enough people saying, you know what, we're not playing this game anymore. If the common man or woman says, this is just bullshit, why would we do this?
But the thing is, it's a chicken or the egg question because you still have to recruit candidates who are willing to fill that gap.
Who are those
and
candidates?
Then also take the risk that the people who answer a poll that really doesn't affect them either way also still show up and vote in that way.
Yeah.
Right? And so it is a little bit of its optimism but I don't think this is new. I think the middle part of the country for a long time has been like the partisanship is dangerous. It's like obstructing anything from actually getting done. And when you ask people on face value, like, should they compromise more? Yes, but do they want their side to compromise? Do they want their ideals to be compromised? No. And so in the sausage making, it's a lot harder. But I do think that there is fatigue in some of the policy stuff from this Trump administration. I don't necessarily see where the leadership is right now with Democrats to capitalize on it. And I still feel like even that question of if they were less ideological is very vague and can mean something very different depending on how you interpret it, to be able to turn that into a message for midterms.
Here's two rather simplistic examples, I think, what I'm talking about. If a Democrat was willing to speak more often about the impact of all of the policies of this country or this state on the middle class and less on the poor, you could get people on the right side of the aisle to vote for a Democrat. On the other side, if you have a right-leaning voter where they would actually the opposite, them to right, where they would see a realistic, rational Republican who didn't embrace Donald Trump, who understands that there are challenges in this country that we can't just ignore, like healthcare.
Yeah, seriously.
If you had that addressed, then you could see that switch as well. That is an opportunity. Whether we'll have candidates that do it, to your point, I don't know. I hope so. I mean, you look at the field of candidates that are already being talked about for 2028. Is Gavin Newsom that candidate for Democrats? I don't know. He leads the biggest states. He's willing to take on Republicans.
He's got high name recognition, I would say, at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one side. Who's the Republican that offers some of that?
Well, Trump's going to run again, don't you know?
Yeah, of course, that's what he said. I mean, the name that used to get thrown around a lot was John Kasich, but he's not going to win anything. He's probably past his political prime anyway.
I mean, I think the heir apparent is J.D. Vance.
Probably, but he's a carbon copy of Trump, and I don't know that he would be much different. But, one can hope. You think we solved it?
No.
I think we explored it in a little bit deeper than we did on the show, and I think that's good. I sense an opportunity. And for me, that's, I guess, all I can hope for right now.
I sense frustration, and I think a lot of people agree on a lot of the same things. I am more worried about the systemic challenges of changing anything because of term limits, because of campaign finance, because of partisan primaries. Like, there's a lot of things set up that I think are structurally hard to change, to actually reflect how people are feeling. But we can keep talking about it.
And ultimately, we decide because we vote. So you have the right message, regardless of what side you're representing or you're trying to talk to. If you have the right message and the public perceives that, you got an opportunity. And I think that's where I have hope. Yeah. She's Kristin Brey. I'm Steve Scaffidi.
We got a new thing to promote.
Yes. We have a newsletter that will be officially coming out this weekend.
This weekend, Sunday, November 2nd.
What's it called?
Extra Points.
Which is a clever name.
Which is a play on our show, Point Taken, but it's kind of the umbrella to all of the things Steve and I do. So It's going to be a recap from the best, the highlights of Point Taken the week prior. We'll obviously always have a link to You Need to Listen and the most recent episode of that. Recommendations of what Steve's reading or watching or listening to. Same here. Reminders of things that are coming up. I'll have my Journal Sentinel pieces in there. So kind of just a way to collect all the things Steve and I are working on, deliver it directly to your inbox. And so if you shoot us an email at extrapoints@wtmj.com, we'll always respond to you. But we also, what's the best way now that we're on an audio to get them to sign up for the newsletter?
Just
text extra to 855-616-1620.
Text line.
And we'll send you the link to sign up for that. And look out for it in your inbox starting November 2nd. It's going to be questions, ways for you to engage, polls of the week, et cetera, et cetera.
Another project, and
also a very easy way for you to have the conversation with us and give us ideas for topics for the Point Taken or this show.
Feedback.
Yeah, so because we can't do this without you. We do this for you. So we don't do it just for ourselves, do we?
I'll see you on the show.
All right.
You need to listen.
You need to listen, not Point Taken.